Imagine losing your home because a woman looked the other way. For millions of years, romantic rejection was a literal death sentence. You either won the girl, or you died alone in the dark. Today, we treat a broken heart like a temporary emotional setback. You get rejected at a bar, you feel humiliated, and you go home. You might lose some sleep, but your life is never in actual danger. Your biology, however, completely disagrees with this modern logic. Deep inside your nervous system, you are still running on ancient software. When you face romantic rejection today, your brain reacts exactly like a prehistoric man facing a death penalty. To understand why your body panics, we have to look back. Let's rewind 2.7 million years ago to the harsh African savanna. Humans were nowhere near the top of the food chain back then. We were essentially walking prey for massive, specialized killing machines. We had no sharp claws, no thick armor, and terrible night vision. Our only weapon was the tribe. Being part of a group meant sharing fire, food, and collective defense. But this protection came with a brutal and unforgiving social price. Ancient tribes were not peaceful communities, where everyone shared everything equally. They were highly structured, deeply competitive, and governed by strict dominance hierarchies. At the top of this pyramid sat the alpha males. These were the men who dictated the movement, the hunting, and the rules. They took the best cuts of meat and slept closest to the warm fire. And most importantly, they controlled almost all access to reproduction. If you were a man at the bottom, your existence was fundamentally different. Modern society tells us that there is someone for everyone. Prehistoric biology tells a completely different, much darker story. Studies in ancient genetics show that far fewer men reproduced than women. A small percentage of highly dominant men passed on their genes. The rest of the men, the ancient betas, were essentially genetic dead ends. They existed to hunt, to protect the perimeter, and to die unremembered. But instinct is a powerful thing, and every man had the drive to mate. This drive created an incredibly dangerous environment for lower status men. To approach a female meant challenging the established social order of the tribe. You were not just risking a simple polite denial from the woman. You were risking the wrath of the dominant males who claimed her. A modern man fears the social awkwardness of being ignored at a party. An ancient man feared having his skull crushed with a heavy rock while the tribe watched. The stakes of romantic interest were literally a matter of life and death. When a prehistoric man made his move and was rejected, chaos followed. The rejection itself was a public signal of his low biological value. It told the entire tribe that he was not worthy of passing on his bloodline. But the consequences went far beyond mere genetic failure. Losing a mating dispute meant losing your social standing entirely. You were pushed to the absolute fringes of the tribal circle. This is where the physical danger became terrifyingly real. In the prehistoric world, your physical location in the camp determined your lifespan. The alphas and their mates slept safely in the center, shielded by everyone else. The rejected men were pushed to the cold, dark edges of the camp. They became the sentinels, the human shields against the horrors of the night. If a pack of saber-toothed cats attacked the sleeping humans, the rejected men died first. Rejection literally pushed you closer to the jaws of wild predators. This is exactly why romantic rejection physically hurts you today. Have you ever felt that tight, crushing sensation in your chest after being turned down? That is not a metaphor. It is a very real neurological response. Brain scans show that social rejection activates the exact same pain receptors in your brain as a physical injury. Your body is flooding with stress hormones, pumping cortisol and adrenaline into your bloodstream. It is preparing you for an imminent, deadly threat. Your ancient brain is screaming that you have just been exiled to the dangerous perimeter. Your modern life might be safe, but your DNA remembers the savannah. When that woman at the office ignores you, or your date walks out, you feel panic. It feels like you are losing your status, your safety, and your future. You feel this way because, for 2.7 million years, that is exactly what happened. The men who did not care about rejection did not survive to become your ancestors. You carry the genetic trauma of millions of defeated men. This deeply ingrained fear dictates almost everything men do today. It is the reason you hesitate before speaking to a group of strangers. It is the reason you feel a spike of anxiety when a stronger man enters the room. We are still playing the ancient game of dominance, just in office buildings instead of caves. The alpha males today are the CEOs, the leaders, the men who command respect effortlessly. And the terrifying part is how quickly the modern tribe will exile you if you show weakness. But there was something else happening in those ancient tribes, something much more sinister. The alphas didn't just push the rejected men to the edges of the fire. They used a specific, calculated psychological weapon to keep them completely broken. A method of social control so effective that it permanently altered human biology. And the most disturbing part is that modern society is using this exact same weapon against you right now. Think about the concept of the nice guy in modern dating. We are told that being agreeable, quiet, and accommodating is the way to win respect. But in the ancient world, being overly agreeable was a survival strategy for the weak. It was how beta males signaled to the alphas that they were not a threat. By dropping their eyes and shrinking their posture, they avoided being killed. This submissive behavior was a biological white flag of surrender. The alphas tolerated these submissive men only because they were extremely useful. The tribe needed bodies to throw at mammoths during a chaotic hunt. The tribe needed light sleepers to wake up when the wolves circled the camp in the dark. The rejected, lower-status men became the disposable workforce of prehistoric humanity. They hunted the food, but they ate the cold scraps left behind. They protected the women, but they were never allowed to touch them. Whenever a beta male tried to step out of this miserable role, the punishment was absolute. The alpha didn't always have to use physical violence to crush the rebellion. They used the collective power of the tribe's social dynamics. They would use public humiliation, a tool as old as humanity itself. The entire group would mock, isolate, and socially starve the offending male. This is the ancient root of your fear of public speaking or social embarrassment. Being laughed at or shunned by the tribe meant you were stripped of your last shred of dignity. It meant the women would view you with permanent disgust, and the men would view you with absolute contempt. In a world where your survival depended entirely on the group's cooperation, this isolation was fatal. A lone human wandering the prehistoric wilderness was nothing but a slow, noisy meal for the apex predators. Without the fire, without the shared food, and without the weapons of the group, you had no chance. To be exiled from the tribe was a guaranteed, brutal death sentence. This is why the pain of a romantic rejection lingers for so long in your mind. Your nervous system treats a breakup or a harsh rejection as an existential crisis. It is not just about losing one specific partner. It is about the terrifying drop in hierarchy. Your brain registers the rejection as a signal that you are becoming completely disposable. It triggers a deep, primal panic that you are being pushed out into the cold dark. The men who survived this brutal system had to develop extraordinary psychological resilience. They had to learn how to mask their fear and project strength even when they were terrified. They had to understand the complex, unwritten rules of tribal dominance and female attraction. The men who mastered this became the new alphas, while the others perished. And this hidden knowledge of power and attraction wasn't lost. It was just forgotten by modern men. But what exactly did the alphas do to ensure their bloodline dominated the rest? How did they physically and mentally break the competition so thoroughly? The archaeological record hides a dark secret about how prehistoric men eliminated their romantic rivals. It wasn't just about winning the physical fight. It was about erasing the loser from history entirely. Look at the primate cousins we evolved alongside, like chimpanzees and gorillas. Their social structures give us a terrifying window into our own brutal past. In a silverback gorilla troop, the dominant male takes complete ownership of every female. If a younger male challenges him and loses, the defeat is absolute and often fatal. Early humans operated on a very similar, violently enforced monopoly on reproduction. The difference is that humans possess weapons, fire, and highly evolved social intelligence. A defeated human male didn't just walk away with a few bite marks and a bruised ego. He was subjected to a coordinated campaign of social destruction by the dominant coalition. The alphas would ensure that no female would ever look at the rejected male again. They created the very first systems of social stigma, marking the loser as permanently undesirable. This invisible mark of defeat was passed down through generations. It shaped the way we interact, the way we compete, and the way we love today. Every time you feel that crushing weight of self-doubt before talking to someone you desire, listen closely. That is the ancient ghost of a defeated ancestor warning you to stay safe. It is the genetic memory of the men who were banished to the darkness. But the mechanism the alphas used to brand these losers is something nobody talks about today. The mechanism the alphas used to permanently break their rivals was invisible, but it was absolutely devastating. It was a biological weapon that your body still uses against you today. When an ancient man challenged an alpha and lost, his biology underwent a brutal, immediate transformation. It wasn't just a psychological realization of defeat. It was a massive chemical crash. The moment a male accepted submission, his brain completely altered his hormone production. His testosterone levels plummeted to near zero, and his cortisol, the stress hormone, skyrocketed. This massive chemical shift did something terrifying to his physical body. It changed the way he smelled. He literally began to project the scent of fear, submission, and defeat. And the women in the tribe were biologically hardwired to detect it instantly. In the prehistoric world, female attraction was not a matter of preference or personality. It was a ruthless calculation of genetic survival. A woman could not afford to mate with a man who could not defend her from a saber-toothed cat or a rival tribe. When a defeated man walked through the camp, his slumped posture and his stress pheromones broadcasted his low status to every female. The women did not feel pity for him. Biology does not reward pity. They felt an overwhelming, instinctual disgust. This instinct of repulsion was nature's way of ensuring that weak genes did not get passed on. The defeated man became invisible to the women, treated not as a potential mate, but as part of the background scenery. He was reduced to the status of a child or a tool. This is the exact same biological process happening when you freeze up in front of someone you are attracted to today. When you approach a woman and you feel your heart racing, your palms sweating, and your voice trembling, you are experiencing that ancient chemical crash. Your nervous system is anticipating a defeat. You are subconsciously adopting the posture of the ancient beta male, shrinking your shoulders and breaking eye contact. And the modern woman, just like her prehistoric ancestors, possesses a nervous system that instantly detects this lack of dominance. She might not smell the cortisol consciously, but her primitive brain registers your submission, and her attraction simply turns off. This same leadership instinct that the first men carried in their blood is detailed in the ancestral alpha male manual, link in the description. By understanding these ancient triggers, you can stop your body from betraying you in high-pressure social situations. Because the reality is, the alphas didn't just win the physical fight, they won the psychological war. They walked with their chests broad, moving slowly and deliberately. This physical expansion signaled a massive influx of testosterone, broadcasting to the entire camp that they owned the space. They didn't have to scan the environment for threats constantly because they believed they were the biggest threat. This relaxed, dominant posture is what triggered an irresistible biological response in the females. But holding on to this alpha status was not a relaxing experience. In fact, being at the top of the prehistoric hierarchy was a nightmare of constant paranoia. The dominant males had exclusive access to the females and the best food, but they were surrounded by desperate, rejected men who had nothing to lose. For hundreds of thousands of years, the alphas maintained control through pure physical intimidation and sheer brutality. If a beta male stepped out of line, the alpha would crush him instantly. Then, something happened that completely destroyed this natural order. A technological glitch in our evolution changed the mating game forever, and it made the alpha males incredibly vulnerable. It was an invention so simple that we take it for granted, but it flipped the prehistoric hierarchy completely upside down. Humans discovered how to throw rocks with lethal precision, and shortly after, they invented the spear. This seems like a detail about hunting, but it was actually the greatest political revolution in human history. Before weapons, a massive, muscular alpha male could easily dominate 3 or 4 smaller, weaker men in a physical brawl. His genetic physical advantage made him essentially untouchable. But a spear doesn't care how big your muscles are. A sharp piece of flint thrown from 20 yards away can kill the strongest man on Earth just as easily as the weakest. Suddenly, the beta males realized something terrifying. They didn't need to fight the alpha male in a fair, face-to-face contest. They just needed to wait until it was dark. This is where the story of human mating becomes incredibly bloody. The archaeological record shows a massive spike in violent, unnatural deaths among prime-age males during this period. The rejected men, tired of being forced to the cold edges of the fire, began to form secret coalitions. The beta males started working together. 3 or 4 weaker men, armed with heavy stones and wooden spears, would wait until the alpha was in his deepest sleep. They would approach the center of the camp in silence. In a matter of seconds, the dominant male, the absolute ruler of the tribe, would be violently eliminated. The betas would then divide his resources, and more importantly, they would claim his mates. This phenomenon is known by evolutionary biologists as the execution of the alpha. It was a brutal leveling of the playing field. The sheer physical size and aggression of the dominant male were no longer enough to keep him alive. If he was too cruel, too greedy, or if he humiliated the lower status men too often, his days were numbered. The betas had figured out that collective violence could instantly overthrow the genetic hierarchy. This terrifying new reality forced the prehistoric alpha male to evolve or face extinction. He could no longer act like a silverback gorilla, beating his chest and taking whatever he wanted by force. If he wanted to survive the night, he had to develop a completely new set of skills. He had to learn how to manipulate the tribe, how to build alliances, and most importantly, how to pacify the desperate men beneath him. The brute force alpha was dead. The era of the political, highly intelligent alpha had just begun. To prevent being murdered in his sleep, the new alpha had to share his most valuable resource. He had to start letting the beta males reproduce. But he couldn't just give up his dominant position. He needed a system that would keep the betas loyal, keep the women under his control, and ensure his own survival. And the solution he came up with is the very foundation of modern human society. It is the reason you live the way you do today, and it involves a massive biological lie. The massive biological lie that saved the alpha males from being murdered in their sleep is something you participate in every single day. It is the very foundation of modern civilization, and it is completely unnatural to our original genetic coding. The alphas realized that a man with nothing to lose is the most dangerous creature on the planet. If the beta males had no hope of ever securing a mate, they would gladly risk their lives to overthrow the hierarchy. The only way to stop the nighttime assassinations was to give the lower status men a reason to stay peaceful. The alphas had to distribute the one resource that mattered most. They had to give up their absolute monopoly on the women. This is the bloody, pragmatic origin of monogamy. It was not born out of romance, and it was certainly not born out of a sudden moral awakening. It was a negotiated peace treaty forged at the point of a spear. By pairing one man with one woman, the dominant males created a system of mass pacification. Suddenly, the beta male had a stake in the game. He had a mate, he had a fire of his own, and he had potential offspring to protect. If he threw a rock at the alpha now, he risked losing his newly acquired family in the resulting chaos. The system worked brilliantly. The betas dropped their weapons, went back to hunting, and built the foundations of human society. But there was a massive, glaring flaw in this new social contract. You can force a behavioral change through violence and politics, but you cannot negotiate with biology. The alphas distributed the females, but they could not distribute the raw, instinctual attraction that the females felt. The women were traded to the lower status men for the sake of tribal peace, but their DNA had not changed. For 2 million years, their nervous systems were hardwired to respond only to the dominant, aggressive, top-tier males. This created a terrifying new dynamic that is responsible for almost all modern relationship anxiety. The prehistoric beta male finally had a partner, but deep down, his nervous system knew the dark truth. He knew that she was with him for survival, not out of primal desire. He provided the food, the shelter, and the safety, but he did not trigger the deep, biological spark of attraction. And he knew that if a stronger, more dominant male wanted to take her, she might not resist. This is the exact evolutionary root of modern romantic jealousy and insecurity. When you see your partner talking to a man who is taller, more confident, or more successful, that sudden spike of heat in your chest is not just an emotion. It is a prehistoric alarm system going off. It is the ancient beta male inside you realizing that the delicate peace treaty is under threat. Your biology is screaming that you are about to be replaced by the very alpha your ancestors tried to overthrow. To survive this new, high-stress social dynamic, the lower-status men had to evolve a new psychological weapon. They developed hypervigilance. They became obsessed with mate guarding. They monitored every interaction, every glance, and every movement their partner made within the tribe. Because romantic rejection in this new era was no longer just about being ignored. It was about being betrayed. If a beta male's mate secretly reproduced with an alpha, the beta would end up spending his entire life hunting and fighting to raise another man's genetic legacy. In evolutionary terms, this is the ultimate defeat. It is a complete erasure of your bloodline while you do all the heavy lifting. To prevent this, prehistoric men began to enforce strict social rules around female behavior, creating layers of shame and consequence that still echo in modern cultural norms. But the women of the tribe were not just passive participants in this ancient political game. They were executing their own brilliant, highly dangerous evolutionary strategy. Biologists call it the dual mating strategy, and it is the hidden mechanism that drives modern dating dynamics crazy. The females needed the consistent resources and the safe protection of the beta male to ensure their children survived the harsh winters. But they still craved the superior immune system, the physical strength, and the dominant genetics of the alpha. So, they adapted to the new rules by playing both sides. They secured the commitment and the resources of the provider male, while covertly seeking the genetics of the dominant male. This ancient dynamic explains exactly why the modern, nice guy finishes last. Society tells you that if you are agreeable, if you pay for the dinners, and if you provide total stability, you will be rewarded with loyalty and burning desire. But your prehistoric biology completely rejects this narrative. When a modern man acts too accommodating, too safe, and too eager to please, he is signaling to the woman's nervous system that he is the provider beta. She might logically appreciate his stability, but her ancient biology will not reward him with primal attraction. Her nervous system is still scanning the perimeter for the man who walks with the broad chest, the man who doesn't ask for permission, the man who takes up space. This is why men today feel a profound sense of confusion and romantic rejection even when they are doing everything right, according to modern standards. You are playing a civilized game, but attraction is an uncivilized process. It operates on the savage rules of the savannah. When you get rejected by someone who says you are too nice, or that they don't feel a spark, what they are really saying is that your behavior does not align with the ancient genetic markers of a survivor. The alphas who maintained their status in this new monogamous world did so by mastering a completely new level of social intelligence. They realized they didn't have to fight the betas anymore. They just had to maintain the aura of dominance. They learned how to control the tribe through psychological leverage, charisma, and the subtle threat of force. They became the first politicians, the first warlords, and the first true leaders. They understood that true power was not just about physical strength, it was about the perception of value. An alpha didn't chase women. He created an environment where women competed for his attention, even if they were paired with other men. He held the frame of the entire tribe. If a lower status man tried to challenge him, the alpha wouldn't even need to raise a weapon. The tribe itself, conditioned by this new social order, would crush the rebel for disrupting the peace. This invisible structure of social value is exactly what dictates who gets the promotion at your job, who commands the room at a party, and who never has to worry about romantic rejection. The men at the top of the modern hierarchy are utilizing the exact same psychological software that the prehistoric alphas used to keep the spear-carrying betas in line. They project an impenetrable reality where they are the prize, and everyone else is just competing for a spot in their orbit. But maintaining this alpha illusion requires a very specific understanding of human behavior. If a dominant man showed a single crack in his armor, if he showed too much fear or too much vulnerability, the illusion would shatter. The betas would realize he was just a man, and the spears would come out again in the dark. The pressure to never show weakness became a crushing psychological burden that men still carry today. We are taught from a young age to suppress our anxieties, to hide our insecurities, and to never let the tribe see us bleed. We do this because millions of years of evolution have taught us that showing weakness is the fastest way to lose your status, your mate, and your life. The fear of romantic rejection is so powerful because it is the ultimate exposure of your vulnerabilities. It is the moment the mask slips, and the tribe sees that you are not the dominant force you pretend to be. This constant, exhausting performance is breaking modern men. We are trying to navigate a digital world with a brain wired for a prehistoric war band. We face rejection on dating apps from thousands of women we have never met, and our nervous system processes every single swipe as a literal banishment from the safety of the fire. The ancient beta male only had to deal with the rejection of the few women in his immediate tribe. You are exposing your biology to a level of mass rejection that it was never designed to handle. The system is overloading, and the resulting chemical crash is causing a massive spike in male anxiety, depression, and social withdrawal. Men are retreating into isolation because their biology is telling them that the tribe has deemed them worthless. But what if you could hack this ancient system? What if you could flip the switch in your own nervous system and signal to the world that you are no longer the disposable sentinel at the edge of the camp? There is a way to overwrite the beta programming. It requires triggering a very specific, deeply buried genetic instinct that forces the modern tribe to completely reevaluate your status. But to do this, you have to understand the final, most brutal test that the ancient females used to filter out the weak. It is a psychological trap that women still use today, completely subconsciously, to break men down and see what they are really made of. And if you fail this test, your romantic life is over before it even begins. The final test that prehistoric women used to filter out the weak is something that still destroys relationships every single day. Biologists call it a fitness test, but in modern dating, it usually just looks like sudden, unnecessary drama. To understand why ancient women evolved this highly aggressive behavior, you have to look at the immense, constant danger they were living in. In the prehistoric world, a woman's survival depended entirely on the strength and emotional stability of her mate. If a pack of dire wolves circled the camp, or if a rival tribe raided their fire in the middle of the night, she needed to know that her man would not freeze in panic. But she couldn't just wait for a life-or-death situation to find out if he was truly brave. If she waited until the predators were already attacking to discover that her mate was a coward, she would be dead. She needed a way to simulate danger. She needed to push his nervous system to the breaking point and observe exactly how he reacted under pressure. So, prehistoric females developed a highly sophisticated psychological mechanism. They began to intentionally provoke the men. They would challenge their authority, act dismissively, or show sudden, unexplained coldness. They were looking for one specific biological reaction: emotional collapse. When a woman tested an ancient beta male, his reaction was instantaneous and disastrous. Because his status was fragile and built on a precarious, negotiated peace treaty with the alphas, any sign of female disapproval triggered his ancient fear of banishment. He would panic. His cortisol would spike, and he would become overly emotional, defensive, or desperately try to appease her. He would apologize frantically, trying to restore the peace and prove his loyalty. This emotional volatility was the ultimate biological failure. It proved to the woman's nervous system that this man was not in control of his environment. If he couldn't even handle a simple psychological provocation from her, how could he possibly protect her from a charging mammoth? His panic was a genetic white flag. It told the female that he was a liability, and her primal attraction would shut down completely and permanently. The alpha male, however, reacted to this test in a completely different way. When the female challenged him, he didn't panic because his reality was not dependent on her approval. His nervous system was anchored deeply in his own physical and social dominance. He would remain grounded, unbothered, and emotionally immovable. He might ignore the provocation entirely, or he might just look at her and laugh. This unshakable emotional control signaled absolute genetic superiority. It told the woman's primal brain that this man was a fortress. His lack of reaction was the ultimate proof of his power. He did not fear losing her, because he knew he was the prize. This stoicism triggered a massive wave of biological attraction, securing his place as the dominant mate. This exact same ancient filtering system is constantly running in the background of your interactions today. When the woman you are dating suddenly pulls away, takes hours to text back, or picks an argument over something trivial, your prehistoric biology is being put on trial. And the terrifying truth is that most modern men completely fail this test. They flood with anxiety. They double text. They ask what they did wrong. They buy gifts to apologize for things they didn't even do, and they try to logicalize their way out of an emotional trap. The moment you do this, you are signaling the exact same chemical crash as the ancient beta male. You are showing her that your reality is easily shaken by her behavior. And just like the women on the savannah millions of years ago, her biological attraction simply turns off, leaving you confused and rejected. Modern society tells you to communicate your feelings, to show your vulnerability, and to always compromise in these moments. Society tells you that the nice guy approach is the mature way to handle conflict. But your DNA does not care about modern social theories. Your DNA responds to strength, stability, and emotional stoicism. When you show panic in the face of romantic pressure, you are telling the modern tribe that you are weak. You are proving that you belong at the cold edge of the fire, waiting to be picked off by the predators. The tragedy of the modern man is that he is completely blind to this ancient game. He thinks he is failing at dating because he isn't tall enough, rich enough, or good-looking enough. He doesn't realize that he is failing because his nervous system is constantly broadcasting the invisible scent of prehistoric defeat. Worse still, the modern environment has weaponized this biological fear. The ancient beta male experienced rejection maybe a dozen times in his entire life, entirely within his small tribe. The modern man on a dating app experiences hundreds of micro-rejections an hour. You swipe on hundreds of profiles, and the silence you receive in return is processed by your ancient brain as a massive, collective banishment. Every ignored message floods your system with stress hormones. Men today are walking around with chronic evolutionary PTSD, and they don't even know it. The digital world is a hyper-stimulating trap designed to keep you in a perpetual state of beta anxiety. But you are not a prisoner to this ancient biology. The human brain is the most adaptable survival tool on the planet. Just as the first humans learned to conquer their fear of fire and use it as a weapon against the darkness, you can learn to conquer the beta programming encoded in your DNA. You can train your nervous system to stop reacting to rejection as if it were a death sentence. You can learn to hold the frame of your own reality, to walk into a room with the slow, deliberate confidence of a man who knows his own value. You have to stop playing the dating game by the rules of the disposable sentinel. You must learn how to project the emotional fortress that prehistoric females spent millions of years searching for. You have to reclaim the ancient knowledge of the men who ruled the savannah, the men who looked into the darkness and were not afraid. Ancestral Alpha Male Manual is in the link in the description. Click now and discover the instinct that every man carries, but few know how to use to regain your leadership posture, self-confidence, and respect.